A 21-year-old girl from the Philippines just made an entire nation cry in front of their television screens. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. Because what happened on Court 12 at Wimbledon was not just a tennis match. It was a message written 6 months ago in silence, finally being read out loud in front of the whole world. But before I tell you how it ended, I need you to sit with how it almost never happened. Because 2 days before this moment, on this very same court, the woman standing across the net had just eliminated a 23-time Grand Slam champion. And 6 months before that, our girl had walked off a court in Australia after losing the very first set of her season 6-0. So, how do you go from that kind of heartbreak to making history in the same year? Stay with me, because the answer is literally stitched, into the visor she wore that day, and I promise you, the last 2 minutes of this video will give you chills. Before we go any further, I need to ask you for something. Not for me, but for her, and for every young athlete out there whose story almost gets lost because nobody was watching. If a story like this deserves to be told properly, deserves to reach people who need to hear it, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because every single subscriber tells this channel that stories like hers matter, that quiet, hard-working underdogs deserve the same spotlight as the champions. So if you believe that too, subscribe before you keep watching. Because trust me, you do not want to miss how this story ends. Her name is Alexandra Eala. She is from the Philippines, and on the back of her visor, stitched in her own language, in Tagalog, are 6 words. Once it grows, it cannot be stopped. She said those exact words in her press conference on a Thursday in July, and hours later she made them true, walking off Court 12 having just done something no Filipino player, man or woman, had done in the entire open era of tennis. She had reached the 3rd round of a Grand Slam. To understand how enormous that sentence really is, you have to go back and see where she started. Before this Wimbledon, Eala had played 6 Grand Slam main draws in her career. She had reached the 2nd round exactly once. She had lost in the very first round 4 separate times. Just this past January, she walked into the Australian Open ranked inside the top 75 in the world, and walked out after losing the first set 6-0, the wrong way around, a set that ended almost before it began. That loss stung. It stung publicly. And it planted a quiet question in the back of everyone's mind, a question nobody wanted to say out loud because it felt unkind, but everyone was thinking anyway. Could she actually close a match at the biggest stage in the sport? Not win 1 round. Not pull off one shocking upset. Could she string together an entire run? Because here is the uncomfortable truth about her record until that point. Her most famous win, a stunning upset in Miami in 2025, happened on a hard court, on a random Tuesday afternoon, on a stage far smaller than a Grand Slam. Impressive, yes, but not proof. Her Grand Slam results told a different story, a story of a talented player who still had not learned how to survive the pressure of the second week. And then came Melbourne in January, that brutal 6-love opening set against Alicia Parks, a 3rd first-round exit at a major in her young career. It was a rough beginning to the year, and the doubt that the tennis world was too polite to say out loud sat quietly in the corner of her career for 2 years, waiting. Now hold that thought, because we are about to walk through the exact week that answered it, and I promise you, what happens in the middle of this story is even more dramatic than the ending. Let's start with her visor, because she wants us to. She had it made with the sampaguita stitched into the design, the national flower of the Philippines, the same flower she wore her hair at Wimbledon the year before. She told reporters that she believes it matters to carry pieces of her culture onto the court, not as decoration, but as equipment, as armor. Where she comes from, she said, is a huge part of who she is trying to become. She said it plainly, without performing for the cameras, in a room where players usually reach for empty phrases. And then she went out and played tennis that matched every word of that sentence. Now look at the number next to her name on the draw sheet. 29. For the first time in her career, she walked into a Grand Slam as a seeded player. 12 months earlier, her ranking had been 140. Read that number again. 140 to 29 in a single year. That is not a lucky week. That is a climb, and climbs like that do not happen by accident. Her first round match gave us the first real clue that something had changed. Her opponent, Renata Zarazua, is a genuinely competitive tour-level player, not an easy out. But Eala created 17 breakpoint chances and converted 4 of them. She struck 22 winners to her opponent's 11. The entire match took just 1 hour and 18 minutes, and she did not lose her serve a single time. Those are not the numbers of someone fighting to survive. Those are the numbers of someone working with total control. And when she walked off that court, she noticed something that surprised even her. A corner of Wimbledon, one of the hardest tickets in all of sport to get, had somehow turned almost entirely Filipino for a Tuesday afternoon first-round match. I was really surprised. She said afterward, "The Filipinos keep surprising me in good ways. I never would have thought that at Wimbledon I would have something like a home crowd." That crowd did not gather by accident. They had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. But here's where the story stops being simple, and I need you to really pay attention here, because this next part is the reason the whole run means what it means. Her second-round opponent was Maya Joint, the Australian player who, just 2 days earlier, had eliminated Serena Williams from the tournament. 23 Grand Slam titles gone at the hands of this same young woman Eala was about to face. Joint walked onto court 12 as the tournament's giant killer, unseeded, ranked 87th, but carrying dangerous momentum, and the history between them was not friendly. Their head-to-head stood at 0 wins to 1, with Joint having already beaten her in a final the year before. This was not a gentle draw. This was the hardest possible test for a player the entire sport was still quietly wondering about. The first set went to Joint 6-3, and in that moment, watching it unfold, it felt like the question was answering itself again, the same old story repeating. But then something shifted. Eala took the second set 6-2, returning more aggressively, serving more compactly, something visibly clicking into place in real time. And then came the third set against the very woman who had ended Serena Williams' tournament 48 hours earlier. And this is a part where you need to lean in, because this is a moment that changes everything. She won that final set 6-0. A bagel in the decider on the grass at Wimbledon against a player nobody in the draw wanted to face. Do you understand what that means? 6 months earlier, in Australia, she had been on the losing end of that exact scoreline in the opening set of her season. Now at Wimbledon, in the biggest moment of her career, she delivered herself, and in doing so became the first Filipina in the Open era to reach the third round of Grand Slam. The bagel had once been done to her. Now she had learned how to do it to someone else, and there was something almost poetic about a young athlete taking the exact wound that broke her spirit in January and turning it into the weapon that made history in July. Zoom out for a second, because this run did not come from nowhere. In March of this year, she was ranked 32nd in the world. 12 months before that, she was 140th. That is not a spike on a graph. That is a slope that has been steadily rising for an entire year. In June on grass, she won the Birmingham Classic, her first ever grass court title, coming back from a set down in the final to win it in 3. Then she arrived in London. Then she won her first round match without losing her serve once. Then she erased a set deficit against a woman who had just eliminated Serena Williams. This is not one lucky moment strung together with hope. This is a sequence. This is a pattern. And patterns do not lie. Now, let's talk about the people who saw this coming before any of us did, because there's a mentor story buried underneath all of this that most headlines are getting completely wrong. Eala has trained since her early teens at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain. Before this Wimbledon even began, the academy posted a message online calling her journey from the Philippines to Mallorca truly inspiring. That is the real, verified voice of support behind her rise. But I have to be honest with you here, because there's a version of this story spreading online right now claiming that Rafael Nadal himself issued some dramatic personal statement in shock right after a win. And as of this recording, that specific claim does not trace back to any verified quote from him. What is actually true is quieter, and honestly, it is more powerful. The people who trained her, who watched her grow up on those courts since she was 13 years old, were not shocked at all. They were not surprised. They had already been telling this story as something worth watching before she had won a single match at Wimbledon. When she won 2 matches instead, the story didn't need to be rewritten. It just aged perfectly. And that more than any dramatic headline, is what real mentorship looks like when it actually works. Not shock, recognition. And now we arrive at the room she has just walked into, because this is where the suspense for her next match truly begins. Her third-round opponent is IGA Swiatek, the defending champion, a multiple Grand Slam winner across every single surface the sport is played on. Their head-to-head coming into this match sits at 1 win each, and that one win for Eala happened back in Miami in 2025, the match that made every highlight reel of the year, but never actually proved she could do it on the biggest stages. This next match will. When asked about it directly in her press conference, Eala did not blink. "It's going to be tough for me," she said. "I'm going to try to make it tough for her as well. She's won a slam on grass. She's won a slam on clay. She's won a slam on hard court. So I'm expecting a great challenge. But I think I'm ready for it. I'm ready to face it head on." That is not the sentence of someone hoping to survive. That is the sentence of someone who understands exactly which room she has walked into and has decided she is not asking to be made smaller inside of it. Now zoom out one final time, because this moment reaches far beyond one player's career. In the entire open era of tennis, no Filipino singles player, man or woman, had ever reached the third round of a Grand Slam before this week. You have to go back 74 years to the amateur era to find anything close when a 5'1" player named Felicissimo Ampon reached the third round at Roland Garros. Since then, there's been silence. Decades of it. Until Court 12. Until this Thursday. Until now. And here is the part one need you to really sit with before we go. Because a turning point only means something if you understand exactly what it turned from. Just 6 months, 11 days before she reached the third round at Wimbledon, Alexandra Eala walked onto a court in Australia, lost the first set 6-0, and lost her opening match at a Grand Slam for the third time in her career. Her interviews afterward were quiet and honest, and hard to watch if you cared about her at all. The Rafa Nadal Academy posted a short message after that loss, and it included a line that I think about more than almost anything else in this story. Not all victories are won on court. She had a long spring ahead of her to get better. And she got better. She climbed to a career-high ranking. She won her first title on grass. And now she has done it again on the biggest lawn in the entire sport. So once it grows, it cannot be stopped. That is a sentence stitched into the back of her visor, written in her own language, chosen by her. And after everything you just heard, it does not read like a slogan anymore. It reads like a diagnosis. She is no longer the story of a promising junior who once won a Grand Slam trophy in the girls' draw and might, someday, translate that promise into something bigger. She is a seeded player at Wimbledon in the third round, with a bagel scored against a woman who eliminated Serena Williams, sitting right there on her record. She is 1 hour and 18 minutes of ruthlessly efficient tennis, and 1-6 love set, away from a piece of history her country has never held before in the modern era of this sport. Whether she beats Swiatek on Saturday is honestly not even the point of this story. The point is the room she is now standing in. Swiatek is in that room. Sabalenka is in that room. Rybakina is in that room. The entire second week of Wimbledon is in that room. And for the first time in her career, in the history of her entire country, Alexandra Eala has walked through that door too, and that door does not close behind her. That is what a real turning point looks like. It is not a fireworks display. It is a hinge, quietly swinging open, and once it swings, there is no going back through it the same way again. If this story moved you even a little bit, if you felt something watching a 21-year-old turn her lowest moment in January into her country's proudest moment in July, then do not scroll away yet, because I want you here for what happens on Saturday. Subscribe right now, turn on the notification bell, and in the comments, tell me the exact moment you first heard the name Alexandra Eala. I am going to read every single one before her next match, because a story like this deserves an audience that actually shows up for the ending, not just a headline.